voice that comes with the platform. As I'm being interviewed, I do say from time to time that I find this insufferable. I find being a black man in this world insufferable. That is informed by my struggle in Nyanga, my escapes with death, my escapes with this. I think I'm very lucky. Like I'm very, very, very lucky to emerge from that. And I say my central thesis is that I would not sign up to be black in this world the way that it's designed.
Yeah.
I would rather even not be here. But I'm saying, I preface it by saying I need to be very careful when I say that, because it can be construed differently, and we have a responsibility because we have a platform. I find it difficult to be black in this world. I think it's not designed for me. I think that it's designed to use my skills as a laborer and pay me the bare minimum. And I find that, and I rebel against that. That's why I don't have a normal job. But then you have to find a way to feed your children. You have to find a way to live within that as well. Are you aware of how difficult it is to be a black person in this world, given your experiences?
You know, in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. And that's why, you know, I try not to claim that your experience is the same as mine, because there are important differences in our experiences. But what I will say is that my vantage point is a very interesting one, because I'm able to see the difference between being black and being white very immediately, right? It's in my family, right? And so I immediately understand that I know the black people in my family, I know the white people in my family, and I know that there's no difference in talent or creativity or brilliance between them. But half of my black family is in poverty, you know, in a rural village in the Eastern Cape, and my white family is not in poverty, right? So I think to some extent, being mixed race has brought home to me, and literally home, racial inequality, right? I know if I use the surname Walsh, that I can get to see a house that's on show. But if I use the name Mpofu, I won't. I'm the same person, but I know those things because I've tested them. I know that if I speak to someone over the phone and they hear my voice, they assume I might be white, and then they'll invite me to something, or I'll need to get some benefit, and I'll show up there. And then suddenly I experience their reaction to my blackness. So I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that there is structural racism embedded deeply into the fabric of our society, and that it oppresses black people and it privileges white people. And sometimes, most of the time, I'm on the receiving end of that, but other times I'm on the benefiting end of that. And in both cases, when I get undue privilege and when I'm on the side of oppression, I experience that and realize it's injustice.
I always predict that anyway in the next 10, 20 years, the situation is so bad that it would surprise me if there is no civil war-ish type of uprising. When you take into consideration that 60% of the workers in this country are black and are earning less than 4,000, which is less than the minimum wage, and also when they talk about unemployment statistics, who's unemployed. I don't think that there's any motivation for black people in this country to maintain the system as it is. I think that all signs leads to them just destructing the system. Of course, similar to the Fears Must Fall movement, what happens after this destruction? What is the end result of the destruction? And I think perhaps people need to figure that out. I don't think that they will figure it out. What they will figure out is that they are pissed off, and somewhere in the next 10 years, they're going to burn shit down. Literally, because I'm not a scholar. I'm not educated to the point where I have to describe it in any way different other than to say they're going to burn shit down. I think that that's going to happen. If you were to look at what happened with predominantly what happened in the KZN last year with the looting, I think that at some point the country is going to be very difficult to live in for black people because they will have no motivation, no stake in what is happening currently. Therefore, they're going to rise up, similar to what happened in the Arab Spring, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt. then you have to then ask the question, what happens thereafter? Have you ever had thoughts about where the current situation is going with South Africans? No electricity, no jobs. You can see that even where I come from in my city in Cape Town, you can see the spatial planning is done deliberately to say, like, if you're 1 hour away from the city, you're poor and you're black. If you're 30 minutes away from the city, you're colored. If you're 10 minutes away from the city, you're white and you're privileged. Even from the planning of the space, the design of the houses, the services that are provided within those places. You can see there's a situation percolating here. All it needs is for people to not be employed at a rate where they feel like, there's nothing for me anymore in this country. Let me burn it down.
Look, I'm deeply worried, as you are. I think we can all feel a sense that the country is slipping away. It's nose diving towards some kind of major crisis. And, that just gives one sleepless nights. I don't want it to descend into violence, though, either. But it's clear that if we don't do something radical in the true sense of the term, if we don't do something radical, meaning uproot the inequalities and injustices that are at the heart of our society, then we will be uprooted, whether it's this year or in 10 years or in 50. This cannot survive and sustain itself. But there are also other interesting things about the structure of our society that in some ways prevent the civil war or the violent uprising that many have predicted. And part of it is geographical, right? Is that people have been put so far away from the centers of power and privilege that it's actually hard, like to go from Ekukwala to Joburg, right? Exactly. So what I fear even more than just a violent uprising or an unproductive, chaotic rebellion is just the status quo getting deeper and deeper. People just going more and more into poverty and not even being able to launch a rebellion because there's not enough food for a rebellion,
Yeah, and just on that point, I'm so sorry. You can see it when people are protesting that because of the lack of resources, the train system is no longer working and stuff like that. That instead of going and marching to the CBD, what they do is they destroy the traffic lights within their area, which inconveniences them.
Yeah,
so you can learn something from that. From analyzing that. If there was some form of a transportation which eases them to go to the CBD and voice their grievances, they would do that. But there's not even such a system. That's why they burn their own schools, they burn their own clinics. But I do think that with those people, with such a frustration where you burn your own schools and clinics, it's only a matter of time that they will find a different way. And it needs an instigator who will say, I will provide resources for this to happen. And who knows if that's not the ANC when it loses power.
Look, that's possible. And I think that would be a terrible situation. There are people who talk about violence and war as if it is, a necessary evil to get to a better place. I'm not one of those. I think that we need to do everything in our power, and it's still within our power to peacefully remake the society. And we can do it, quite quickly, I believe. But if we don't, then, and I do think, it's almost become fashionable now for some reason to not talk about race and racism. People say, oh, well, the problem is not, let's just put the best people in the best positions. And, racism is not the reason why ESCOM is, and that's true. Not everything is racism. And the ANC government itself has made massive mistakes and has betrayed South Africa. And should not be voted for. But that doesn't mean that the structural racism that has always existed went away somewhere. And it feels to me like people now want to divert the question about racial justice by saying, no, but what about the government? No. Both must be dealt with. We must deal with this ANC. But that doesn't mean that we're going to now accept the racism which has always been part of the problem. And those two problems are our problem at the moment. It's not one or the other.
Yeah.